हेलो एवरीवन, वेलकम टू द अनदर वीडियो ऑफ स्पार्क। आज के वीडियो हम लोग बात करने वाले हैं स्पार्क का एग्जीक्यूशन मॉडल के बारे में, हाउ स्पार्क एग्जीक्यूट्स योर प्रोग्राम। और इसके एक ओवरव्यू देंगे, ज़्यादा डिटेल में नहीं जाने वाले हैं इस वीडियो में, लेकिन एक ओवरव्यू समझने के लिए कि स्पार्क एग्जीक्यूट कैसे करता है। So in Spark execution model, the first question is what are the different ways in which we can execute our Spark program। जैसे अपने पुराने वीडियो में या पिछले वीडियो में आपने देखा था कि स्पार्क की जो कोड है या पाई स्पार्क की जो कोड है हम लोग रन कर रहे थे डाटाब्रिक्स में। So there are multiple ways we can run the Spark program through different vendors UI, or with the Spark internally we can execute in multiple ways. But basically there are two ways in which we can execute the Spark code. The first is the interactive mode and the second is the batch mode. So there are two ways. First is interactive mode and other is the batch mode. Batch, or you can tell it the submit mode. So interactive mode means when you are writing the command or you are writing the code, at the same time you are getting to see the output. It's a manual way of interacting with the system with the help of Spark code. So in this mode, you can like how we were running the code in the Databricks. So in this one, we were running the code in the Databricks. We were writing the command and submitting it at the same time. It can be a kind of interactive mode. The other mode is through the terminal itself. So I'll open the terminal. So in terminal, like if you write here Spark, sorry, we can write here PySpark. So it will open the terminal of the Spark. So I have the Spark version 3.5.3, and this is my Spark terminal, in which if I write the command here, I'll get the answer here itself. So this is the other way of interactive mode. So interactive mode generally development या small use case test करने के लिए होता है, आपके command को test करने के लिए होता है. And in the production or in any of the cluster environment, we go with the Spark submit, how we submit the code. So in the submit mode, we have Spark inbuilt command, which we call it Spark submit. With the help of Spark submit, you can submit the any of the Spark code into the Spark cluster. The other way is through the vendor. For example, Databricks had its own way of submitting the notebook. Like in here itself, you can run the full command, or you can submit the full notebook in a cluster if you're running on a cluster. There are another ways, like if you're working on some of the cloud third party tool, so they have their REST API version, in which with the help of REST API you can submit the Spark code. In the Jupyter notebook also, you can do the Spark submit, you can submit the notebook, and in the Jupyter notebook you can also do in the interactive mode, like how we have done in the Databricks notebook. So basically there are two ways, interactive and Spark submit. कंपनी में आप जनरली Spark submit में काम करने वाले हैं, लेकिन अपने लोकल सिस्टम में आप अगर जॉब में भी या कंपनी में भी काम कर रहे हो किसी प्रोजेक्ट में, फॉर टेस्टिंग फ्यू ऑफ द कमांड, फ्यू ऑफ द सिनेरियो, यू आर गोइंग टू यूज द इंटरेक्टिव मोड. तो अब ये क्लियर हो गया हो कि स्पार्क हम लोग सबमिट कैसे करते हैं. देयर आर टू वेज, इंटरेक्टिव एंड द in the Spark submit mode. Now we want to understand the how a Spark program execute. So how a Spark program gets into execution. So what are the process in that? सो स्पार्क, अभी हम लोग बात करने वाले हैं स्पार्क एप्लीकेशन या स्पार्क फ्रेमवर्क कैसे काम करती है. वी आर नॉट गोइंग इनटू द स्पार्क और द हार्डवेयर, द क्लस्टर, हाउ इट इज क्रिएटेड. व्हेन यू सबमिट एनी प्रोग्राम टू द स्पार्क फ्रेमवर्क, it creates a master, and each master has multiple slaves. So I'll just draw the diagram here. So if this is master, I'll copy this. You can call it as a master. This is slave. So each master can have multiple slave. Okay. So now I'm not talking about the cluster master slave architecture. Cluster can have their master slave. Cluster can have another way of dealing with the master slave. It cannot have it may not have the master slave architecture. It may have something different way of dealing with the cluster thing. That is a hardware thing, and I'm not concerned about that. Here I'm talking about the application. When you are submitting a program, when you are submitting a program to the Spark framework, it creates a master, and each master has the respective multiple slave as per the requirement. So in the Spark terminology, we call master as driver, and slave as executor. So executor actually works on your program. It does all the execution with the help of task. There can be multiple tasks inside each executor. Now this full process, it looks like independent process, master and all the slaves. This can run on a single node also. This can run on multiple node also. So executor can have multiple tasks, and driver program is responsible for the execution for the application, for one application. So if you are submitting another application, so there will be another master for that application. To make it more simple, I'll put it in a different way. For example, you are submitting one program to the Spark framework, Spark cluster. There will be one driver for that Spark program. If you are going to submit another Spark program to that Spark framework in the cluster, so you will have a different driver for that particular program. So for each program, or you can tell it for each application, you will have a single independent driver and their respective executor, which you can call it as a slave. That particular driver is only responsible for the work of that particular application. So what happens when you submit the program, the driver gets created, and for creating the driver, it asks for some resource. Like your program will ask some resource to the cluster manager. So you have the cluster, you have the actual CPU machine. So there is a cluster manager. So there can be multiple cluster manager like Yarn, Mesos, standalone, like in the cluster itself, the cluster is managing. So we have basically two cluster manager which is used across the industry, the Yarn and Mesos. So I'm taking an example of a Yarn. So for example, I have a cluster manager. You can tell it like this as a Spark framework, and I can write here a cluster manager. So cluster manager will allocate one container, one JVM for master driver, for a driver. So as per the like when you have submitted the Spark program, you can give the memory parameter. So as per you have given the memory parameter, or by default what the memory parameter is being set, with that parameter, driver will ask the cluster manager to give different container for each of the executor. So for asking any resource, driver will go to the cluster manager and ask the resource. Each will work on a container. Each will have their own container and own JVM. Once everything has been allocated to the driver, cluster manager has nothing to do with this application. The driver program, which we call it a master, will take care of all the executor, which take care of all the tasks. If a executor is not running, driver has a responsibility to restart it or move this particular task to some other executor. It can start some other executor. So driver is kind of local guardian to a application. There will be multiple local guardian for each of the application, and there will be a bigger guardian for all the cluster, which we call it a cluster manager. So this is very simple way to explain like how the Spark program gets executed into a Spark cluster. Now, when you there are different mode of submitting the Spark program, which we'll discuss when we'll be go into more detail. But I want to mention it here just for your knowledge purpose. So if you are running the Spark in your local machine, if you are submitting the Spark or deploying the Spark program by writing as a local deployment mode as a local, then your master or your driver will be created in your local machine. For example, from your laptop you are submitting the program, your laptop will become a driver. We will discuss this in detail in the later point in another video, but just for the knowledge. So if you are doing the deployment of the Spark in a local mode, your driver will be in the local machine. If you are going to deploy the Spark or you are going to put the parameter deployment mode as a cluster, then your driver program is going to start in any one of the node of a cluster. Node means in a cluster manager, actually there will be multiple nodes. So in any one node, the driver program will start, and accordingly it will execute the executor also. So this was a very simple explanation. In the next video, we'll discuss how to run the Spark in a local mode. We'll do some PyCharm or some of the tool which I'll look into it. Some of the tool which will do the setup, and accordingly we'll understand that when you're doing the like this explanation which I have explained now, like when you submit the Spark program and what happens in the Spark framework in the cluster, this is for the Spark submit. When you do the Spark submit, when you're submitting the program. But what happens when you are interactively interacting with the Spark cluster? When you are interacting with the Spark cluster with the help of, for example, notebook, or when you are interacting with the cluster with the help of the command prompt. So in that case, how Spark framework deals with it. If you don't have a cluster, if you have a single machine, your, for example, your desktop or your laptop which you have, so how you run the Spark program and how a Spark program executes it internally. We'll look into it in more detail in the next video. So for this video, it was a simple explanation for how the Spark works, or you submit your program. I hope this would be clear to you. You will be able to understand this. If you have any doubt, किसी भी तरह का doubt हो Spark में, please post in the comment. If you're not comfortable in posting the question in the comment, then try to just write a mail to me. You can go to the channel description. You can get my mail ID and just mail me your doubt. I will clear all your doubt in the Spark. Either you give in a comment or you give in a mail. तब तक के लिए अपना ख्याल रखें. Take care and happy learning.